What if the way you see yourself is the only thing standing between you and the life you're meant to live? Not your past, not your failures, not the opinions of others, just a quiet story you repeat in your own mind every single day. Because here's the truth most people never hear. The future doesn't begin with opportunity, it begins with identity. The moment you change how you see yourself, you change what you believe is possible. And when what feels possible expands, your choices expand, your courage expands, your entire life expands. So if you've ever felt stuck, overlooked, or unsure whether you're capable of more, stay with me. Because this one piece of advice, simple, powerful, and often ignored, has the ability to transform not just what you do next, but who you become next. There is a quiet burden many people carry without ever speaking about it, a weight built not from what is happening now, but from what has already happened. Moments of failure, embarrassment, regret, or missed opportunity slowly begin to shape the way a person introduces themselves to the world. Instead of saying, "I'm someone who is learning," they begin to believe, "I am someone who failed." Instead of thinking, "That was a mistake," they start to feel, "That mistake is who I am." And over time, the line between an event and an identity becomes blurred. But the truth, simple, liberating, and deeply powerful, is that your past is something you experience, not something you are. It is a place you visited, not the place you must live forever. Every human being collects moments they wish they could redo. Words spoken too quickly, chances not taken, risks avoided, decisions made from fear instead of courage. These memories can feel permanent, almost carved into stone, because the emotions attached to them were real. Pain makes memories feel important, and important memories feel defining. Yet growth has never required a perfect past. In fact, the people we admire most are rarely the ones who avoided mistakes. They are the ones who refuse to let mistakes become the final definition of their story. What separates a life that expands from a life that stays stuck is not the absence of failure, but the refusal to build an identity around it. When someone believes they are their past, they begin to limit their future without realizing it. They stop trying before they start. They stay silent when they should speak. They choose safety when courage is required. Not because they lack ability, but because they have accepted a version of themselves that no longer needs to be true. Identity is powerful in this way. The brain works hard to remain consistent with whatever story it believes. If the story says, "I'm not capable," the mind will quietly search for proof. If the story says, "I always mess things up," every small mistake will feel like confirmation. But when the story changes, even slightly, the direction of a life can change with it. Imagine the freedom in understanding that mistakes are information, not condemnation. They are signals pointing toward growth, not sentences declaring limitation. A failed attempt is evidence that you tried. A wrong decision is evidence that you were brave enough to choose. Even regret, painful as it is, proves that you care deeply about becoming better. None of these things are identities. They are experiences, and experiences are meant to teach, not trap. The moment you begin to see them this way, something inside you loosens. The grip of the past weakens, and space begins to open for possibility. Letting go of an old identity does not mean pretending the past never happened. It means choosing a wiser interpretation of it. It means saying, yes, that was part of my journey, but it is not the definition of my destination. Growth requires honesty, but it also requires compassion. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love who is trying again after falling. You would not tell them they are hopeless. You would remind them that one moment does not erase their potential. You would encourage them to stand, to learn, to move forward. And the same truth must be extended inward, because the relationship you have with yourself shapes every other relationship in your life. There is also a hidden strength inside every past mistake: perspective. What once felt like an ending can become the very reason you develop resilience, empathy, patience, or courage. Many people discover their purpose inside the places where they once struggled the most. Pain, when understood, becomes wisdom. Failure, when examined, becomes direction. The past stops being a prison and starts becoming preparation. And preparation is powerful because it means nothing you lived through was wasted. Every experience becomes material for the person you are still becoming. The future opens the moment you stop introducing yourself through yesterday. Think about how often people repeat limiting sentences without noticing. "I'm just not good at this. I've always been this way. People like me don't succeed." These phrases sound harmless, but they quietly lock doors that have not even been tested yet. What if instead the introduction changed? Not to something unrealistic, but to something truthful and hopeful. "I'm learning. I'm growing. I haven't figured it out yet, but I will keep trying." Small shifts in language create powerful shifts in belief. And belief shapes behavior more than talent ever could. Time itself supports this truth. The person you were 5 years ago is already different from who you are today. Thoughts changed, priorities changed, understanding deepened. If change has already happened before, then change is clearly possible again. Nothing about you is frozen unless you decide it is. Life keeps moving, inviting you forward, offering new chances to respond differently, choose differently, become differently. The past may explain you, but it does not control you unless you hand it that authority. There is courage in releasing an identity built from pain, because even familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar hope. But hope is where growth lives, and growth is where life expands. The decision to see yourself as more than your past is not made once. It is made daily, sometimes quietly, sometimes with effort. Each time you try again, speak kindly to yourself or take a step that the old version of you would have avoided, you are proving something powerful, not to the world, but to yourself. You are proving that identity is not fixed. You are proving that the future is still open. You are proving that who you are becoming matters more than who you used to be. And in that realization, something remarkable happens. Shame begins to lose its voice. Possibility begins to speak louder. The mirror no longer reflects only history, it starts to reflect potential. You begin to see not a collection of mistakes, but a person in progress. Not someone disqualified, but someone still invited. Not an ending, but a beginning that has been waiting patiently for you to believe it was allowed to start. There is a quiet illusion many people begin to believe as the years pass, the feeling that their life has somehow already been decided. They look at their current circumstances, their age, their past choices, and they start to assume the story is mostly written. Dreams feel delayed, paths feel closed, and possibility feels smaller than it once did. But this belief is not truth. It is only a perspective shaped by fear and habit. The deeper truth is far more hopeful and far more powerful. Nothing about you is finished. As long as you are here, breathing, thinking, choosing, your story is still unfolding in real time. A story is not defined by its early chapters. Many of the most meaningful turning points happen long after the beginning, often in moments that once seemed ordinary. A single decision to try again, to forgive, to learn, to risk, or to believe differently can redirect an entire life. Yet people underestimate these small decisions because they do not look dramatic in the moment. They feel quiet, almost invisible. But stories are not shaped only by grand events. They are shaped by consistent choices. Every action you take today is writing a sentence that did not exist yesterday, and those sentences slowly become paragraphs, chapters, and eventually a future that once felt impossible. What makes this idea so powerful is that it returns responsibility to the present. You cannot rewrite yesterday's pages, but you are holding the pen for today. That means the direction of your life is not controlled only by where you started or what you lost along the way. It is influenced every single day by the decisions you are willing to make now. Even the smallest shift in direction, repeated over time, creates a completely different destination. This is how transformation truly happens, not in a single dramatic leap, but in steady, intentional movement forward. Sometimes people resist this truth because unfinished stories feel uncertain. Certainty, even when limiting, can feel safer than possibility. If the story is already decided, then there is no risk of failure, no vulnerability in trying, no discomfort in change. But there is also no growth, no discovery, and no new meaning. An unfinished story requires courage because it asks you to participate. It asks you to believe that your next choice matters. And believing that your choices matter is the beginning of personal power. Think about how different life feels when you truly accept that the next chapter has not been written. Regret begins to loosen its grip because it is no longer the final word. Labels placed on you by others begin to lose authority because they describe only a moment, not a destiny. Even doubt starts to soften because doubt belongs to uncertainty, and uncertainty is simply proof that possibility still exists. When nothing is finished, everything is still available to change. Growth often arrives disguised as interruption. Plans fail, doors close, paths disappear. In the moment, these experiences feel like endings, but many times they're simply transitions between chapters. A chapter ending does not mean the story is over, it means the narrative is moving somewhere new. Some of the most meaningful directions in life begin exactly where the original plan stopped working. What once felt like loss becomes redirection. What once felt like confusion becomes clarity, and what once felt like the end becomes the beginning of something deeper than you expect. Ed. There is also beauty in realizing that authors do not need perfect conditions to continue writing. They write in uncertainty, in revision, in incomplete understanding. Life works the same way. You do not need complete confidence to take the next step. You do not need guaranteed success to begin again. You only need willingness, the quiet decision to keep participating in your own becoming. Each time you choose to learn instead of quit, to hope instead of withdraw, to act instead of delay, you add another meaningful line to your story. The present moment is far more creative than it appears. Inside a single day exists the power to change direction, perspective, and identity. One conversation can restore courage. One idea can open a new path. One brave decision can begin a transformation that echoes for years. Because stories are not changed only by time passing. They are changed by choices made within that time. And those choices are always available now. It is easy to compare your unfinished story to someone else's middle or ending and feel behind. But comparison misunderstands how stories work. Every life follows a different rhythm, a different pacing, a different sequence of lessons. Some chapters are slow because they are building strength. Some are painful because they are teaching truth. Some are quiet because they are preparing courage. None of this is wasted. Development is happening even when progress is not obvious. The page may look still, but meaning is forming beneath the surface. Hope becomes realistic, not naive, when you understand that the future is not something that simply happens to you. It is something shaped line by line through attention and intent. Xian, this does not mean everything will be easy or predictable. Stories worth telling rarely are. But it does mean that your role is active, not passive. You are not just a character reacting to events. You are a participant influencing direction. And participation is where purpose begins to grow. There will always be moments when the story feels unclear, when the next sentence is difficult to write, when the blank space ahead feels intimidating. But blank space is not emptiness, it is opportunity. It is room for something new that has not existed before. The unwritten chapter is not something to fear, it is something to respect. It holds possibilities your past could never contain. As long as you continue choosing, learning, and moving forward, the narrative continues, meaning continues, becoming continues. Nothing about you is complete, and that is not a weakness, it is a gift. Because an unfinished story is a living story, and a living story always carries the quiet promise that the most important chapter may still be ahead, waiting for the moment you decide to write it. There is a common belief that confidence is something you must feel before you begin. People wait for the fear to disappear, for certainty to arrive, for a clear sign that they are ready. They imagine that confident people move forward without doubt, without hesitation, without the quiet voice of uncertainty whispering in the background. So they pause, they prepare endlessly, they delay the moment of action, hoping that one day they will finally feel brave enough to start. But this belief quietly keeps them stuck, because confidence was never meant to come first. Confidence is not the starting point of growth. It is the result of movement. It is built in the small, imperfect moments when someone chooses to act despite uncertainty. The first step is rarely graceful. The first attempt is rarely strong. The first effort is often filled with hesitation and self-doubt. Yet something powerful happens the moment action begins. Fear loses a little of its control. Possibility becomes slightly more real. And the distance between who you are and who you could become becomes just a little bit smaller. Think about any skill you admire. Speaking, leading, creating, building, performing. None of these began with confidence. They began with awkward beginnings, visible mistakes, and quiet persistence. Every confident person you see today once stood exactly where uncertainty lives. The difference is not that they felt ready. The difference is that they moved anyway. They allowed action to teach them what waiting never could. Because action carries information. It shows you what works, what doesn't, what needs practice, and what is possible. Waiting only preserves doubt, but action begins to transform it. There is also something deeply human about nervous action. It means you care. It means the outcome matters to you. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is more important than fear. When you act while your voice shakes, when you try while unsure of success, you are strengthening an invisible muscle inside you. Each attempt, no matter how small, becomes evidence that you are capable of moving forward. And evidence is what slowly builds belief. Many people misunderstand confident individuals because they only see the finished version. They see the calm presentation, the strong decision, the steady voice. What they do not see are the hundreds of uncertain moments that came before, the quiet practice, the failed attempts, the times when doubt was loud but action was louder. Confidence, in truth, is simply familiarity with effort. It is what grows when the unknown becomes known through repeated experience. And repeated experience only happens when someone chooses to begin before they feel ready. Permission is another invisible barrier. Some wait for approval from others, a sign that they are good enough, talented enough, worthy enough to try. But permission is rarely given in the way people expect. The world does not always announce that you are ready. Opportunities often appear disguised as risk. Growth often appears disguised as discomfort. If you wait for universal approval, you may wait forever. The most important permission is the one you give yourself. The quiet decision that trying is allowed, even if success is not guaranteed. Action reshapes identity in subtle but powerful ways. The moment you take a step, you are no longer just someone who dreams, you are someone who does. The moment you speak, you are no longer only someone who thinks, you are someone who expresses. These small identity shifts matter because behavior and belief influence each other continuously. When you act, your mind begins to update its understanding of who you are. And as that understanding changes, future action becomes easier. This is how confidence quietly follows, not as a sudden arrival, but as a gradual companion built through experience. Failure, which many fear most, is actually one of the strongest builders of confidence when understood correctly. Each failure survived proves resilience. Each mistake corrected proves learning. Each setback faced proves strength. Over time, you begin to trust not that everything will succeed, but that you will continue regardless of the outcome. And this trust in your own persistence is far more powerful than fragile certainty. It creates a confidence that is steady, flexible, and real. There is freedom in accepting imperfection at the beginning. When perfection is no longer the requirement, starting becomes possible. Progress replaces pressure. Learning replaces fear of judgment. You allow yourself to be a beginner, and beginners are allowed to grow. This mindset turns action into exploration rather than evaluation. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" the question becomes, "What might I discover if I try?" And discovery is where confidence finds its roots. Time plays an important role in this transformation. One small action may not feel significant, but repeated actions reshape an entire life. What once felt impossible becomes familiar. What once caused anxiety becomes routine. The nervous first step becomes a steady stride. Looking back, the change can feel surprising, almost unreal, yet it was built from ordinary moments of choosing to continue. Confidence, then, is not a personality trait given to a few. It is a process available to anyone willing to begin before certainty appears. Inside every person exists a version of themselves waiting on the other side of action. Not a perfect version, but a stronger, wiser, more capable one. This version is not created by thinking alone. It is revealed through doing. Each step forward introduces you to someone you have not fully met yet. The person you become through effort. And meeting that person again and again slowly replaces doubt with quiet belief. The path forward will never be completely free of fear. Even confident people feel uncertainty when facing something new. The difference is that fear no longer decides their direction. Action does. They have learned through experience that movement creates clarity, that effort creates growth, and that confidence is not something to wait for, but something that forms along the way. So they continue not because they always feel brave, but because they understand that bravery grows in motion. And in that understanding, hesitation begins to soften. The distance between intention and action becomes smaller. The future becomes less about wondering what might happen and more about discovering what will happen when you try. Confidence does not arrive as a loud announcement. It appears quietly, step by step, built from moments when you move forward while still unsure. And one day, almost without noticing, you realize that the courage you were waiting to feel has been growing inside you the entire time, shaped by every imperfect action you chose to take. There is a conversation happening inside you every moment of the day. It speaks when you wake up, when you make decisions, when you face challenges, and even when you sit quietly with your thoughts. Most of the time, this voice is so familiar that you barely notice it. Yet it quietly shapes how you see yourself, what you believe is possible, and how far you allow your life to expand. Long before the world responds to you, this inner voice has already decided what kind of response you expect to receive. Many people assume confidence, success, or happiness are created mainly by external circumstances, opportunities, recognition, support, or luck. But before any of those appear, something deeper is already influencing the outcome. The tone of your inner dialogue becomes the lens through which you interpret everything. If the voice inside you is harsh, doubtful, or constantly critical, even good moments can feel temporary or undeserved. Progress feels small. Mistakes feel permanent. Possibility feels distant. Not because reality is hopeless, but because perception has been shaped by the words you repeat to yourself. This inner language often begins forming long before you realize it. It can be shaped by childhood experiences, past failures, comparisons, or the expectations of others. Over time, borrowed opinions become personal beliefs. Repeated thoughts begin to feel like truth. You may start to describe yourself with quiet limitations, telling yourself you are not talented enough, not strong enough, not ready yet. These statements may seem harmless, even realistic, but the mind listens carefully to repetition. Whatever you say often enough becomes the story you live inside. What makes this powerful is that the world tends to mirror the identity you carry internally. When you believe you are capable, you take risks that reveal new opportunities. When you believe you are unworthy, you hesitate in moments that could change everything. The same situation can produce completely different outcomes depending on the story happening in your mind. This is why two people with similar circumstances can experience entirely different lives. The difference is not always talent or luck. It is often the quiet voice guiding their choices. Changing this voice does not require pretending everything is perfect. It is not about unrealistic positivity or ignoring real challenges. It is about honesty combined with compassion. Instead of saying, "I will never succeed," the voice can learn to say, "I am still learning." Instead of declaring, "I always fail," it can shift to, "I am improving with practice." These small changes may appear simple, but language shapes emotion, and emotion shapes action. A supportive inner voice creates space for courage. A destructive one creates walls of hesitation. Awareness is the first turning point. The moment you begin to notice how you speak to yourself, you gain the power to choose differently. Thoughts that once felt automatic can be questioned. Harsh judgments can be softened. You begin to understand that not every thought deserves belief. Some thoughts are echoes of the past, not instructions for the future. And when you stop obeying every negative sentence in your mind, freedom quietly begins to grow. There is also deep strength in treating yourself with the same respect you offer others. Most people would never speak to a loved one with the cruelty they sometimes use on themselves. They would encourage, support, and remind that person of their potential. Extending that same kindness inward is not weakness, it is wisdom. Because growth rarely happens in environments filled with constant criticism. It happens where effort is recognized, where mistakes are allowed, and where hope is given room to breathe. As the inner conversation changes, behavior begins to change with it. You start attempting things you once avoided. You recover from setbacks more quickly. You become less afraid of judgment because your self-worth is no longer dependent on external approval. Slowly, the outside world responds differently, not by magic, but by momentum. New actions create new results. New results reinforce new beliefs. What began as a quiet shift in thought becomes visible transformation in life. Patience is essential in this process. The voice in you, our head was not formed in a single day, and it will not transform instantly. There may be moments when old patterns return, when doubt speaks loudly again. This does not mean progress is lost. It simply means change is still unfolding. Each time you gently redirect your thoughts toward truth instead of fear, you strengthen a healthier pattern. Repetition, once used to build limitation, now becomes a tool for growth. Over time, the inner voice can become a steady source of guidance rather than criticism. It begins to remind you of your resilience during difficulty, your progress during slow seasons, and your worth even when outcomes are uncertain. This does not remove challenges from life, but it changes how you walk through them. Instead of feeling alone against the world, you carry support within your own mind. And that internal support is one of the most powerful forms of strength a person can have. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The distance between who you are and who you believe you can become begins to close. Dreams feel less like fantasy and more like direction. Effort feels meaningful instead of exhausting. You start living from possibility rather than protection. All of this begins not with a dramatic external event, but with a quiet internal decision to speak to yourself differently. The world may not change overnight, but your experience of it does. Opportunities that once felt invisible become noticeable. Challenges that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Relationships shift because you show up with greater clarity and self-respect. And step by step, the life around you starts reflecting the belief growing within you. In the end, the most influential voice you will ever hear is the one that has been with you all along. When that voice learns to speak with truth, patience, and encouragement, it does more than improve your thoughts. It reshapes your direction. And as the conversation inside becomes stronger and kinder, the results outside begin to follow, quietly proving that the way you speak to yourself was shaping your future all along. From a very early age, many people are quietly taught that their value must be demonstrated. Approval becomes the reward for good performance. Comparison becomes the measure of success, and recognition becomes the signal that they are finally enough. Without realizing it, life slowly turns into a stage where worth feels conditional, something to be earned through achievement, validation, or the opinions of others. This belief follows people into adulthood, shaping careers, relationships, and even dreams. They work harder, push further, and strive endlessly, not always because they love the journey, but because they hope that one day the world will confirm what they have been trying to prove all along, that they matter. But proving is a fragile foundation for a meaningful life. It depends on external judgment, and external judgment is never fully stable. Praise can disappear. Expectations can change. Someone else can always appear more successful, more talented, or more visible. When worth is tied only to proof, peace becomes temporary and satisfaction becomes short-lived. Even great achievements may feel strangely empty because the deeper need was never recognition, it was wholeness. And wholeness cannot be given by applause. It can only grow from within. There is another path, quieter but far more powerful, the path of becoming. Becoming is not about convincing the world of your value. It is about living in a way that reflects the truth of who you are capable of being. It shifts the focus from performance to growth, from comparison to purpose, from approval to authenticity. Instead of asking, how do I look in the eyes of others? The question becomes, am I moving closer to the person I am meant to become? This single shift changes everything, because the measure of success is no longer outside your control. When life is centered on proving, fear often leads. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. Decisions become cautious, shaped by how they will be perceived rather than how they will help you grow. But when life is centered on becoming, courage begins to lead instead. Growth requires risk, honesty, and patience. It allows mistakes to become teachers rather than evidence of inadequacy. It creates space for learning, exploration, and genuine progress. The energy once spent on impressing others becomes available for building something real inside yourself. Becoming is deeply personal. No two journeys look the same, because each person carries different strengths, struggles, and possibilities. This means comparison loses its power. Someone else's timeline is no longer a threat, and someone else's success is no longer a judgment. Your path belongs to you alone. Progress is measured by sincerity of effort, depth of character, and alignment with purpose rather than by visibility or status. In this space, growth becomes meaningful rather than competitive. There is also freedom in accepting that becoming is a lifelong process. You are not required to arrive at perfection. You are invited to continue evolving. Each season of life reveals new lessons, new challenges, and new dimensions of who you can be. Instead of feeling pressured to prove yourself once and for all, you are allowed to remain in motion, learning, adapting, and expanding. This ongoing transformation is not a sign that you are incomplete in a negative sense. It is evidence that you are alive and capable of more. One of the most powerful realizations in this journey is understanding that worth is not created by achievement. Achievement can express your abilities, but it does not manufacture your value. Your value exists before success and remains after failure. When this truth becomes clear, effort is no longer driven by desperation. You can work hard without feeling empty, strive without feeling afraid, and dream without feeling dependent on approval. Action becomes an expression of who you are becoming, rather than a test of whether you are enough. Letting go of proving does not mean abandoning ambition. It means transforming ambition into something healthier. Instead of chasing recognition, you pursue excellence. Instead of seeking validation, you seek growth. Instead of asking whether others are impressed, you ask whether you are living truthfully. This kind of ambition is sustainable because it is rooted in purpose rather than pressure. It fuels progress without destroying peace. Relationships also change when becoming replaces proving. You no longer need to perform to be accepted. You can show up honestly with strengths and imperfections both visible. This authenticity invites deeper connection because real relationships are built on truth, not performance. When you stop trying to convince others of your worth, you create space for people who recognize it naturally. And that kind of recognition feels different. calmer, steadier, and more genuine, there may still be moments when the old desire to prove returns. Years of conditioning do not disappear instantly, but each time you notice that urge and gently return your focus to growth, you strengthen a new way of living. You remind yourself that the goal is not applause but alignment, not perfection but progress, not comparison but character. Over time, this mindset becomes more natural, and the need for external validation begins to fade. Peace enters quietly when you realize that becoming the person you are capable of being is already meaningful, even if the world never fully sees it. Integrity practiced in private matters. Kindness offered without recognition matters. Effort made when no one is watching matters. These invisible victories shape your character, and character shapes the quality of your life far more than public success ever could. In this understanding, fulfillment stops depending on visibility and starts growing from authenticity. Eventually, you may notice a profound shift. The question, "Am I enough?" loses its urgency, not because you proved it, but because you lived it. Through growth, honesty, resilience, and continued becoming, you experience your worth rather than argue for it. Life feels less like a performance and more like a journey of unfolding truth. And in that space, there is a quiet confidence that does not need permission or applause to exist. To become rather than prove is to live with deeper freedom. It allows you to move forward without carrying the exhausting weight of constant judgment. It invites you to honor your potential with patience instead of pressure. And it reminds you that the most meaningful success is not convincing the world of your value, but living in such a way that your own heart finally recognizes it and rests in the simple, powerful understanding that who you are becoming has always been enough.